In the dusty frontier town of El Dorado, nestled between rugged mountains and endless plains, lived a man named Elias Thorne, a widower whose heart had been shattered by the loss of his beloved wife to a fever that swept through like a merciless wind. Elias, once a prosperous miner, now scrapped by odd jobs, his days filled with the echoes of loneliness that haunted his small cabin on the outskirts. One fateful afternoon, the town buzzed with unusual excitement as a traveling auctioneer arrived with a caravan of curiosities from distant lands, promising wonders that could change fortunes overnight. Among the items up for bid was something utterly unexpected: a young Chinese woman named Mai Ling, captured during a raid on a merchant ship and brought across the ocean against her will. Her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and despair as she stood on the wooden platform, chains lightly binding her wrists. The auctioneer, a sly fellow with a twirled mustache, spun tales of her exotic beauty and mysterious origins, claiming she was a princess from the Orient, skilled in ancient arts that could bring prosperity or peril. The townsfolk whispered in awe and suspicion, for Chinese immigrants were rare in these parts, often met with prejudice and fear of the unknown. Bids started high, but as the sun dipped lower, interest waned. The men saw her as a burden rather than a boon, and the women clucked their tongues in disapproval. Elias, drawn by an inexplicable pull, perhaps seeing a reflection of his own isolation in her solitary figure, raised his hand with his last $3 coins earned from mending fences that morning. The gavel fell with a resounding crack, and just like that, Mai Ling became his, one for a pittance that belied the storm she would unleash. As he led her away, the crowd dispersed with murmurs of folly, but Elias felt the spark of hope, imagining companionship in his empty home. Little did he know, Mai Ling was no ordinary woman. She was the daughter of a powerful warlord from the Qing dynasty, kidnapped by pirates who sold her to the auctioneer, and her disappearance had set in motion a chain of events that would reach across seas. That night, as Elias offered her a simple meal of bread and stew, Mai Ling spoke little, her English broken but her gaze piercing, hinting at secrets buried deep within. He unchained her, treating her with kindness born from his own grief, and she retired to a corner bed, her mind racing with thoughts of escape and revenge. Outside, the stars twinkled indifferently, unaware that far across the Pacific, a fleet of ships bearing her father's banners was already sailing, informed by spies who had tracked her path. The town slept soundly, oblivious to the gathering thunder. Elias dreamed of a new beginning, but dawn would bring chaos unforeseen. Mai Ling, in her silence, plotted her next move, knowing her presence was a beacon for those who sought her. The widower's impulsive act, meant to fill a void, had instead opened a gateway to turmoil, where cultures clashed and fates intertwined in ways no one could predict. As the moon waned, shadows lengthened, foreshadowing the attack that would test the very soul of El Dorado. The morning sun rose over El Dorado like a reluctant witness, casting long shadows across the dirt streets where merchants opened their shops and children scampered to school. Unaware that the fabric of their peaceful existence was about to tear, Elias awoke to the aroma of unfamiliar spices wafting from his kitchen. Mai Ling, freed from her bonds, had risen early to prepare a modest breakfast using herbs she carried in a hidden pouch, a gesture that surprised him with its grace and hinted at her noble upbringing. They shared the meal in tentative silence, broken only by her soft questions about the land and his life, her accent lilting like a distant melody. Elias, touched by her vulnerability, shared stories of his late wife, Sarah, whose laughter once filled the cabin, and how the mind collapse had taken his dreams along with his fortune. Mai Ling listened intently, her dark eyes reflecting empathy, but beneath it simmered a resolve forged in the fires of her captivity. As the day progressed, Elias showed her around the town, introducing her to skeptical neighbors who eyed her traditional silk dress with curiosity and disdain, whispering about the Chinaman's curse that followed such folk. The sheriff, a burly man named Harlan, pulled Elias aside with a warning, "You bought trouble for $3, Thorne. Folks say them Orientals bring bad luck." But Elias shrugged it off, feeling protective of Mai Ling, whose quiet dignity won over a few hearts, like the baker's wife who offered her a fresh loaf. Unbeknownst to all, on the horizon, dark sails dotted the ocean, closing in on the coast where scouts from My Ling's father's armada had landed under cover of night, their mission clear: retrieve the princess at any cost. These warriors, clad in black silk and armed with curved blades and ancient firearms, moved stealthily through the wilderness, guided by maps drawn from interrogations of the pirates. Back in town, My Ling slipped away briefly to a secluded spot, where she performed a ritual with incense, sending a silent prayer that her rescuers would find her soon. Elias noticed her absence but attributed it to shyness, busying himself with chores. As evening fell, the first signs of unrest appeared: a distant rumble mistaken for thunder, but it was the hoofbeats of mounted scouts racing toward El Dorado. Panic stirred when a lone rider burst into the saloon, gasping about ghostly figures in the hills, but the patrons laughed it off as tall tales from too much whiskey. My Ling, sensing the approach, felt a mix of relief and dread, knowing the clash would spill blood. Elias, oblivious, invited her to sit by the fire, where he taught her simple English words, their laughter echoing softly. Yet, as midnight approached, the town's complacency shattered. War cries pierced the night, and shadows descended upon El Dorado like vengeful spirits, the attack commencing with ruthless precision. Flames licked at barns, and gunfire echoed, turning the sleepy town into a battlefield where the widower's cheap purchase proved to be the catalyst for destruction. Chaos erupted in El Dorado as the first wave of attackers stormed the outskirts, their silhouettes illuminated by the torches they hurled at wooden structures, setting the night ablaze with orange fury. My Ling's rescuers, an elite force of 20 warriors led by her brother, Li Wei, moved with the discipline of imperial guards, their faces masked and bodies armored in lacquered plates that gleamed under the moonlight. They had tracked her through whispers from port towns, and now, with the element of surprise, they targeted the auctioneer's wagon first, seeking vengeance for her humiliation. Elias, jolted from sleep by the screams, grabbed his old rifle and rushed outside, finding My Ling standing calmly amid the pandemonium, her expression one of quiet anticipation rather than fear. "What is this?" he demanded, but she simply replied, "My family comes," her words cutting through the din like a blade. The townsfolk rallied haphazardly, men arming themselves with whatever they could find: pitchforks, shotguns, even kitchen knives, while women and children huddled in cellars. Sheriff Harlan bellowed orders, forming a ragged line of defense at the main street, but the attackers were ghosts, striking from shadows and vanishing before counterfire could land. Li Wei, a master strategist, directed his men to encircle the town, cutting off escape routes and focusing on locating My Ling's signal, a lantern she had lit in the cabin window. Explosions rocked the general store as hidden charges detonated, scattering debris and sowing terror. Elias, protecting My Ling, fired into the darkness, hitting one assailant who crumpled with a cry, but more emerged, their arrows whistling past like angry hornets. My Ling urged Elias inside, revealing a hidden dagger from her sleeve, ready to fight if needed, but her loyalty lay with her kin. As the battle intensified, stories of heroism and cowardice unfolded. The blacksmith charged with his hammer, felling 2 warriors before succumbing to a sword thrust. The saloon owner barricaded his doors, only for flames to consume the building. My Ling's heart ached for the innocents caught in the crossfire, whispering apologies to Elias, who began to understand the gravity of his auction win. Li Wei, spotting the lantern, led a charge toward the cabin, his voice calling her name in Mandarin, a sound that filled her with joy. Gun smoke choked the air, and bodies littered the streets, the town's attack a brutal symphony of clashing steel and booming shots. Elias, wounded in the arm, refused to abandon My Ling, his widower's resolve hardening into fierce protectiveness. The rescuers breached the defenses, closing in, their war cries echoing the pain of separation. Amid the inferno, bonds formed and broke, as the night wore on in relentless violence, testing allegiances and revealing truths long hidden. As the siege on El Dorado dragged into the early hours, the town's defenders mounted a desperate counterattack, with Sheriff Harlan leading a group of volunteers to flank the invaders from the church steeple, raining down bullets that forced Li Wei's men to seek cover behind wagons and fences. My Ling, torn between her heritage and the unexpected kindness of Elias, pleaded with him to flee, but he stood firm, bandaging his wound with a torn shirt while reloading his rifle, his eyes blazing with determination born from years of loss. The air thickened with the acrid smell of gunpowder and burning wood, as homes crackled and collapsed, sending sparks dancing into the sky like malevolent fireflies. Li Wei, spotting his sister through the chaos, signaled his archers to provide covering fire, arrows embedding in walls inches from Elias's head. A warning shot that Mai Ling interpreted as restraint. She stepped forward, raising her hands in a gesture of peace, calling out in her native tongue to cease the assault, but the language barrier fueled misunderstandings, and a stray bullet grazed her shoulder, drawing blood that stained her dress crimson. Elias roared in fury, pulling her back and firing wildly, his shots scattering the approaching warriors. Tales of individual bravery spread through the fray. A young boy, no more than 12, snuck through alleys to warn isolated families, earning him a hero's mantle. An elderly widow armed with a frying pan bashed an intruder senseless, her spirit unbroken. The attackers, though skilled, were outnumbered now that the town had fully mobilized. Farmers arriving from nearby ranches with fresh ammunition. Li Wei adapted, ordering a feint retreat to draw out the defenders, then ambushing them in the open square where bodies piled like fallen leaves. Mai Ling, tending to her wound, confided in Elias about her royal lineage, how her kidnapping was part of a larger plot by rivals to weaken her father's empire, and how the auction was the lowest point of her ordeal. Elias, listening amid the gunfire, felt a surge of empathy, realizing his $3 bid had entangled him in international intrigue. As dawn's light crept over the mountains, illuminating the devastation of smoldering ruins, wounded moaning for help, the battle reached a crescendo, with Li Wei breaching the cabin door, his sword drawn but hesitation in his eyes upon seeing Mai Ling's protector. A tense standoff ensued, words exchanged in hurried Mandarin and broken English, alliances shifting like sand. The widower's stand became legendary, a testament to human connection amid destruction, as the town fought for survival against the oriental storm. With the first rays of sunlight piercing the smoke-laden sky, the battle for El Dorado began to turn, the townsfolk's resilience wearing down the attackers who, despite their superior training, faced exhaustion from the long journey and relentless resistance. Elias, shielding Mai Ling with his body, negotiated a parley through her translations, his voice steady despite the pain from his injuries, proposing a truce to avoid further bloodshed. Li Wei, impressed by the widower's courage, lowered his weapon slightly, his warriors holding back as Mai Ling stepped between them, her presence a bridge across cultural chasms. The town square, now a cratered wasteland of upturned carts and shattered glass, became the site of impromptu talks, with Sheriff Harlan joining warily, his deputies covering from rooftops. Stories of the night's horrors circulated, a family trapped in their burning home, rescued by a chain of neighbors passing buckets, a warrior sparing a child's life, hinting at honor amid the carnage. Mai Ling explained her father's wrath, how the auction's indignity demanded retribution, but Elias countered with pleas for understanding, sharing his own tale of loss that mirrored the universal pain of separation. As tensions eased, aid arrived from neighboring settlements, alerted by smoke signals, bolstering the defenders and forcing Li Wei to reconsider annihilation. He revealed a chest of gold from his saddlebags, offering compensation for damages if Mai Ling could leave peacefully, but she hesitated, glancing at Elias with newfound affection forged in fire. The widower, his heart opening after years of closure, urged her to go, but whispered promises of reunion, igniting a spark of forbidden romance. Warriors tended to their fallen, and townsfolk did the same, a fragile peace settling like dew. Yet, underlying currents swirled, our prejudices against the invaders simmered, and Li Wei's pride chafed at the stalemate. As hours passed, agreements formed, the attackers would withdraw with Mai Ling, leaving reparations, but she insisted on Elias accompanying as a guest, to ensure safe passage and perhaps explore a future together. The town, battered but unbroken, began rebuilding, hammers echoing as symbols of renewal. Elias, packing his few belongings, reflected on how $3 had upended his world, bringing not just a woman, but a whirlwind of change. Mai Ling, bandaged and resolute, bid farewell to the cabin that briefly sheltered her, her eyes holding secrets of what lay ahead across the seas. The departure from El Dorado unfolded under a wary truce, with Li Wei's remaining warriors forming a protective escort as Mai Ling and Elias mounted horses, the town's survivors watching with a mix of relief and resentment, their homes in ruins but spirits intact. The journey to the coast stretched over days, traversing arid deserts and lush valleys, where the group camped under starlit skies, sharing stories that bridged divides. Elias recounting frontier legends, Mai Ling translating tales of ancient Chinese dynasties filled with emperors and dragons. Bonds formed unexpectedly. A young warrior taught Elias basic swordplay, laughing at his clumsy attempts, while Mai Ling confided in her brother about the widower's gentle soul, softening Li Wei's initial disdain. Along the way, they encountered bandits drawn by rumors of the gold chest, leading to skirmishes where Elias proved his mettle, earning respect from the guards. Mai Ling's wound healed slowly, tended by herbal remedies from her homeland, and in quiet moments by the campfire, she and Elias shared whispers of dreams, his loneliness melting in her warmth. Arriving at the hidden cove where the armada anchored, massive junks with billowing sails awaited, their decks alive with crew preparing for the voyage home. Elias marveled at the sight, a world away from his simple life, as Mai Ling's father, the formidable warlord Chen, greeted them from the flagship, his stern face cracking into joy upon seeing his daughter. Explanations flowed, with Mai Ling vouching for Elias, portraying him as her savior rather than owner, twisting the auction's shame into a tale of fate. Warlord Chen, grateful yet cautious, invited the widower aboard, offering him a place in their court as an advisor on Western ways, an unprecedented honor. The seas called, and as the ship set sail, El Dorado faded into memory, its attack a chapter closed but lessons enduring. Elias adapted to ship life, learning customs and languages, his heart blooming in unexpected love for Mai Ling, who reciprocated with fierce passion. Storms tested their resolve, waves crashing like the town's chaos, but unity prevailed. Upon reaching China, grand palaces awaited, where Elias navigated intrigue, his $3 gamble evolving into a life of adventure and alliance. In the opulent halls of the king court, Elias Thorne found himself thrust into a realm of silk tapestries and jade carvings, a far cry from El Dorado's dusty streets, where Mai Ling's family embraced him tentatively as the man who won their princess but ultimately protected her. Warlord Chen, seeing potential in the widower's resilience, assigned him tasks blending Western innovation with Eastern tradition, such as improving defenses against foreign incursions using mining techniques Elias knew well. Mai Ling flourished in her home, her spirit unbroken by captivity, and their relationship deepened into a secret courtship. Stolen glances amid lantern-lit gardens where cherry blossoms fell like snow. Challenges arose. Court rivals plotted against the barbarian outsider, spreading whispers of ill omens from the auction, but Elias countered with wit and loyalty, foiling an assassination attempt that solidified his place. News from El Dorado trickled via traders of the town rebuilt stronger, with tales of the attack inspiring unity against prejudice. Sheriff Harlan penning letters of gratitude for the gold that funded new schools. Mai Ling and Elias married in a grand ceremony fusing cultures, her in red silk, him in tailored robes, symbolizing harmony. Years passed, children born with mixed heritage bridging worlds, as Elias rose to advisor, influencing policies that opened trade routes. The $3 win became legend, retold in ballads across lands, a reminder that fortune favors the bold. Yet, echoes of the town's attack lingered, lessons in empathy and the cost of ignorance. Elias, no longer a lonely widower, found purpose in this new life, his heart full. Decades later, the legacy of that fateful auction endured, with Elias and Mai Ling's descendants thriving in a world increasingly connected, their story inspiring novels and plays that captured the drama of the El Dorado attack and the romance that followed. Elias, in his twilight years, returned to the frontier with Mai Ling, visiting a prosperous El Dorado, now a bustling city, where monuments honored the fallen and celebrated cultural fusion. Grandchildren played in streets once bloodied, unaware of the $3 spark that ignited change. Mai Ling, wise and graceful, reflected on freedom's price. Her life a tapestry of loss and gain. Elias passed peacefully, his last words of love echoing the bid that started it all, leaving a world forever altered by one man's impulse and a woman's resilience. The end.